Hi, my name is Kees, and I help people from doing to being. I'm a life coach and spiritual teacher. And today I'm here again with Liviu Beschieri. Am I saying it correctly?
Beschieri. Yeah, I mean, fine.
It's more Italian than I thought.
It sounds Italian, yeah.
Yeah. And you're a relationship coach, right? That turned spiritual teacher. A lovely process which we talked about already a little bit. I don't know if there's anything you would like to tell us first about your project, Secure Being.
Secure being.
Yeah.
And there's much to tell. There's two ways to see it. So one is as a verb, and one is as a noun.
Yeah.
So it's like becoming a secure being, as in a secure person or soul, or just life being secure as you, as opposed to insecure in its view and approach to life, to its experience, right?
Yeah.
So that's the noun kind of version. You can also see it as a verb, as secure being, as in being.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of thing.
Cool.
But again, the idea is that it's meant to point to this kind of what I see as the enlightened way of being. It's not that I am there yet. It's more like that's the journey that I see as for us to let go of the ignorance and the insecurity that comes from that ignorance, from that unawareness of our unity with life, with the divine.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a distinction between insecure and secure way of seeing life and approaching life.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we clarified it last time in the previous conversation, but it's as I've come to see, all our suffering or struggle. So suffering is internal discomfort, and struggle is external problems in our life with relationships, with money, and so on, even health.
Yeah.
Like those come from our insecure view and approach to life. So insecurity or fear creates the drama, the mess. So once we become secure by becoming aware of truth, reality, life begins to function the way it's meant to function, in a harmonious, kind of beautiful, joyful way.
Yeah. And you do offer coaching there, right? On the securebeing.org website.
Yeah, I mean, I was doing relationship coaching for about 5 years. I had a long distance relationship blog before, about 10 years or so, that I started it, which kind of led to the coaching. And then for the last 2 years, I have been basically doing nothing. I was kind of taking a hiatus, unintended, kind of going with the flow, going with my joy, following the joy.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of feeling pulled to start being of use and service. And I'm not sure yet how, but just recently, actually, just before, I mean, just to point to the synchronicity of everything, just before you offered to have an interview, 2 days before, I started the mentoring kind of page and be like, okay, let's see, maybe that's one of the ways that I can begin helping.
Yeah.
Through coaching, mentoring.
Yeah. So yeah, I would advise anybody, if you're interested to what Liviu's telling about, then go to the website and see if he can help you directly. Okay, so last time we talked about the 3 paradigms, right? And to summarize, basically the first one, right? You could say you're unawake and you're not trusting life. You're on autopilot usually. And then something happens and you feel like you only trust yourself. You want to go for it yourself, sort of be the self-made man or woman. And then at some point, I see that leads to a sort of spiritual journey. And you also talked about the 3rd paradigm being actually the non-dual reality, or trusting life again, or not, maybe not again, but it feels again because I'm thinking from a soul perspective. Usually, or well, that seems to happen, let's say. But yeah, that was a very beautiful insight in the journey, I think, for people watching. And the interesting thing to me is also that if you sort of reach that paradigm, that third paradigm, which is very new to a lot of people because they're in the second paradigm. Most people are in the second paradigm, and a lot of people also in the first paradigm, but I think less people in the third paradigm. And I think most people watching this are interested in a third paradigm. And are interested in how would that be, you know, how would that work? And I think one of the things we talked about in previous conversations together is that what you call the 5 qualities of the divine, which I think we move naturally into, right? When all this stuff comes up, which is one of the first things which happens, which you talked about in the third paradigm, right? Stuff comes up, we deal with it. We have we build our mental immune system by actually relaxing and being okay with that which comes up. And then very interested to hear more about what happens for you or how you see that, or you said talking about the divine this morning. So let's do that.
Talking about the divine. It's a beautiful topic, man.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about truth. I mean, you could argue that truth is not conceivable or speakable. Like you can't really describe it, but we're trying. We're just doing our best here. And what I'm going to share now is kind of a conceptual model for what the divine looks like and how it wants to express and manifest in form. So you could say that the qualities of the divine are meant to be expressed and lived as our experience. So what I've come to see is that you could almost describe the divine in these 5 qualities, right? So you could say that life, the design of life, which we call the divine, comes from a place of intelligence and kind of creative intelligence. It's a loving, intelligent field, if you want. So how would that express? And these are 5 ways that it could manifest as. So it's harmony, wholeness, freedom, oneness, and abundance. So I see these as almost like the parameters of reality that are already true, and we're basically revealing those parameters in our experience, like as a soul, if you will, and as a collective, as a society, right? So we're removing the misunderstandings, all the ignorance and the insecurity, and basically revealing these qualities and stepping into them. Now, it's not something that we do, it's what happens already, it's what's happening. Like none of what we're talking about here, from the third paradigm perspective that we're talking about all this, is something that we do. So it's not a pressure to try to embody these qualities. It's more of pointing at them so that the mind can become aware of their truth and therefore almost have the permission to live by those truths. And we'll explain what each of those kind of qualities mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about showing the mind that that's how things are already, and it's safe to live by these qualities, as in to allow the divine to manifest in this kind of individual expression.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's almost how safety manifests. Huh? So it's safety bringing, sort of being the opening in which this then could happen. You know, this very interesting metaphor I like is at the some of the Eastern temples you see, like Hindu temples or Buddhist temples in Asia, you have a lot of these demons at the doors of the temples. And the idea is that you can only step into the divine if you're okay with these demons. So it's a sort of, they're a protector of the divine almost, in a way. And we misunderstand them as a sort of, as a sort of a burden by itself. But when we step into that, like you said, when we sort of are okay with them, we step into safety. And we come from another place in which these divine qualities can unfold, right?
Yeah, it's almost like this darkness is covering the light. And the more we become aware of the light, the more kind of darkness fades away because it has no place. So darkness or evil or demons, you could say, are the expression or the embodiment of ignorance, of fear, insecurity, separation. Whether it's, if you go into metaphysical kind of teachings where it's described as embodied entities and so on, or just inside of us, like the heaven and hell. When you're like all caught up in insecurity, you're in hell. And where, like when you're grounded in truth, you're in heaven because truth feels good.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, that's one of the qualities of truth that is very important to realize, that was useful for me to realize. There's a quote by Rumi, and it's just beautiful. One of my favorite quotes. He says, that which is false troubles the heart. Perspective that is false. But that which is true brings joyous tranquility. So because it brings joyous tranquility because it helps you see that, hey, this is a divine creation. It's an intelligent, loving creation. And when you kind of buy into the fear perspective, you're losing that, and it troubles the heart. So how you know that something is false? You're troubled. Your mind is troubled. Your heart is troubled. You're worried. That's when you're caught into the illusion of fear.
Yeah, beautiful.
So, yeah.
And then, so my experience is almost as you, maybe we can go into more depth of those 5 divine qualities, but my experience is almost when you name those 5 qualities, that it's almost like this is a sort of universal thing which happens to people once they let go of being a person, once they step into safety. And slowly over time, and it doesn't mean that they're sort of this grandiose saint that is not doing anything wrong anymore, or sort of wrongness is of course a concept, but that is not that's moralistic super or something like that, but it's more that they have a sort of quality in their presence and their being and their experience, their personal experience themselves. So maybe you can share them in more depth.
Yeah, so we said, for example, the first one is harmony.
Yeah.
So the way I've come to see this is that life is already harmonious. Like, there's two kinds of, there's all kinds of perspectives on these qualities that we can go in depth into. But for simplicity, we could say there's the absolute nature of those qualities, as in fully manifested harmony, where there's absolutely no dysfunctionality, no pain. It's fully optimal, just perfect functioning at the level of the absolute. But then there's also the relative expression of those qualities where we're at. Okay, so harmony, for example, I see harmony being the case, kind of being the design of life that we're not yet aware of, so we're slowly moving toward. So we're at a relative embodiment of that harmony. As an individual, as a person, you could say, living our life and as a collective society. I mean, just think about human history. it's coming from a lot of dysfunctionality and killing and manipulation and hate and kind of discrimination and dominance and so on. So that's coming from disharmony, dysfunctionality, fear, ignorance, closer and closer toward the revelation of the harmony that is already built into life. Okay, so I almost see it as a car. Like imagine life, existence, form, manifestation as a car that is perfectly designed. But if we have problems in our life, it's not because life is not harmonious. It's because we're driving that car under the influence of fear, right? Like under the influence of alcohol. Like if you're drunk, you're gonna drive it pretty badly, right?
Yeah.
So we're driving it at our level of awareness of what is true and what is safe and how it's safe to function. So you could say at our level, our paradigm, you could say.
Yeah, our shift.
Yeah, and actually this brings me to the idea of free will. So what I've come to see free will as is the current capacity of the entity of the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the level of awareness that you're at, which determines how safely you're driving and how harmoniously you're driving the life, your life, and so on. So that's the harmony aspect.
Yeah, it's sort of, it's the absence of resistance almost, right? In the driving.
You could say that there's many other things as well. I mean, when it comes to driving life harmoniously, at the absolute level, there's perfect functionality. There's it's fully optimal. There's no pain. There's no like, you're not hurting anyone. You're not hurting yourself either. Like you're kind of the embodiment of truth, and there's no fear influencing your inner state and your outer actions.
Yeah. And how would harmony manifest? How could we see that?
Yeah, we can. That's a good question. We can see that actually all around if we kind of begin inquiring. So, for example, I saw that, let's say, with business. It's interesting that when we do something that we love, we end up being very committed to it. We put the time in, we appear to be disciplined, right? Because we love doing it, because it's so relevant. Then this leads to excellence. Excellence, or being very good at it, leads to contribution to others, which then it's an exchange of value. They pay you for that or help you in all kinds of ways. So you see the harmony here, like how beautiful the design is, that when we're all doing what we want to do and honoring our nature, it's kind of like Einstein said it, I think, that you don't want to make a fish climb a tree, and that's kind of what we're trying to do as humans. We all have our nature, our aptitudes, our way of being. And when we're not allowing ourselves to do what we're designed to do, what we love to do, based on our joy, we end up trying to climb trees when we're meant to be in water, for example, or rabbits swimming in water. Like, makes no sense. But that's a pointer toward the harmonious nature design of life. That there doesn't have to be any sacrifice. You see, that's how life beautifully designed it. When we do what we love, we actually end up being of service, and everybody is gaining from that. For example, a different kind of example would be, imagine the sexual experience. It's like if the harmonious design, like if life wants to create humans, right? Human bodies, it makes the sexual experience one of the most pleasant experiences one could have. You can see the harmony there. Imagine if sex wasn't pleasant and life wanted to create humans.
Yeah,
it wouldn't work.
Those species have already died, probably.
Yeah. And then, for example, let's look at other things. Like, as humans, we like that which is fat, and we like sugar a lot. Why? Because this is what we use to gain energy. Of course, we can go to an extreme, and that's not harmonious either. But there's a reason why we like those things, is because they serve our survival and aliveness, if you will.
Yeah.
So there's many other examples with relationships, for example. What I've noticed when working with guys is that relationships that don't last a long time, it's because we choose our partners in an ignorant way, in a needy way. It's like someone likes you a little bit and you fall for them instantly just because they gave you some attention, and you try to make it work, but it's not compatible. So there's not a harmonious alignment there. And of course, those relationships don't work. Yet, when two people are perfectly aligned, you could say compatible, there's a great affinity on a body level, how they look and how they think, and kind of the level of development as a soul and so on. When there's alignment and affinity, those relationships work, sometimes for a very long time, depending on what is relevant. But that's the expression of harmony with relationships, for example. There's I don't believe in rejection. It's redirection. You can't be rejected by someone who is aligned for you.
Yeah.
So once you start exploring philosophically, like I like to do, that's kind of the kind of mind I have, you start seeing the harmony everywhere.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So that things are there for a purpose, right? And everything makes sense in the end. I think I've had several people which I guided at some point have a sort of experience, including myself, of course, of that everything is in the right place in the universe, or a sort of vision that everything is compatible in the end, and I know that my everything makes sense in the end, and I know that my grandma at the end of her life was in sort of visions and on medications, and she also told my mother this sort of. She woke up, she was totally non-spiritual, and she said, I want to tell you everything is right, everything is exactly, everything went exactly as it should go. And she died a couple of weeks after that, but very very interesting, because all these people sort of, she had it at her end of her life, but I've guided some people, including myself, that have this sort of insights in spiritual reality. You can easily start to notice the harmony at some point.
You begin to notice it also, like in the development of your life story.
Yeah.
That nothing was random.
Yeah.
Again, you could see that as love doing everything through our capacity, and if our capacity is limited, it's gonna be dysfunctional expression. It's still love doing it. It's just expressing in the best possible way at that capacity for the people involved, so that each one can evolve their capacity and become aware of what's not seen yet accurately. So everything is, one of the ways that I like to describe reality sometimes is everything is love, done by love, even when it hurts, to make room for more joy.
Yeah.
And that's a very experiential observation, if you will, and you can see that clearly when you start having different examples.
When I sometimes speak to people, it's sort of like we're so trained to look at things from an isolated perspective that we then look at something like this is a bad event, even though we don't know what the future holds, or we don't know, what that was meant to teach us, or what it's pointing at, or even just how it could be an opportunity. It's a sort of and what I don't try to do is this sort of idea of saying, well, it's all meant to be and blah, blah, blah. Of course, there is some pain in the moment, which is also very valid. But then it's also very valid to look at things from the other side and saying, we don't know how it in the end will fit. And if we look back and we're honest, we can in the end see that that the things that have happened to us already fit in some sort of way, even though they might not be the complete puzzle yet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I see it as everything is happening harmoniously at our capacity in the most relevant way for us at this point in the journey.
Yeah.
And that's the key here, that people don't understand, that it's happening at our capacity. And that's why the pain, the suffering, and so on, and also at the collective capacity. For example, at the collective capacity of a country, that let's say is a third world country that is very poor, well, the capacity of that country's leaders can be still limited, still based on fear, which leads to corruption and dominance and greed and so on. But we're also functioning at a kind of global level of awareness that is still very limited, still based on fear, or there's beings or people who have a lot of power that are still based on fear. I mean, you could argue that that's still love acting as them at a certain level. Anyway.
Yeah. It's a sort of, it easily gets reflected as well to see the opportunity for joy, actually, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And can you tell me about more about the second quality? I think it was wholeness, right? Or oneness.
Let's talk about freedom first.
Oh, freedom, sorry. Yeah.
So we have harmony, we have freedom. So freedom has to do with the freedom to be as you are. So relatively speaking, it's okay to be as you are at this point in the journey. But also the freedom to be as you are in the sense of like your nature, like your sexual orientation or your passions or your interests, your quirks, your kind of weirdness. It's just the freedom to be you, right? There's no need for fish to climb trees. It's the freedom for fish to be fish, rabbits to be rabbits. Metaphorically speaking, is for us to own who we are fully and freely.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing. For example, I'll give an example that speaks to this of my in my own life. I think my girlfriend is vegan, and a lot of people that I know are also vegetarian or vegan, and I've tried it, but it doesn't really resonate with me right now. Even though that I would moralistically say that vegan would be the better choice. If we would have a collective choice, I would choose vegan for everybody. It would make things a lot easier. But I feel that even though that would be my rational choice, it does not fit with my life currently to be vegan. And I mean, we eat vegan at home and things like that. So, I tend to eat mostly vegan, but still it doesn't really resonate with me to sort of to limit myself in this way, you could almost say. And I feel that at some point this might happen for me, but it's a very interesting thing to give myself the freedom to be, you could say, a laggard in this, or sort of not the first one to go vegan or something like that. It's a sort of relaxation that you then bring to yourself, knowing also that you don't have to do everything right, because there is no right. We think that that's right. We don't really know, because I've also read research that plants have a lot of agony when you kill them, similar to actually to cows and pigs and things like that. So it's a very strange thing, because you also have this natural tendency of, you could say the shark is not thinking, should I go vegan? Right? It's just, there's just this natural tendency to do what is right for the shark. And it's a very strange thing. But what I want to say is that this freedom aspect is so crucial, because it can give us a sort of break from our mental ideas of what's right and what's wrong, and to step back from that and say, I don't need to do anything with that, which is, of course, a part of what this whole safety and security is about.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what your ideas about that are.
Yeah, the thing about freedom, this quality like of the divine manifested as form, is that it's the freedom to follow your nature, your joy, the freedom to be you. And it's what I'm saying here is that it's already the case, like you're already free, it's already safe to be you, to follow your joy, your nature, your inner guidance. That's like the safest, your soul, you could say, safest path and the most effective way you can approach life, this experience of life. It's not a luxury, or it's not an exception. It's when we allow ourselves to follow our passions, our way of being in the world, at whatever capacity we're at. That's when life moves at the most relevant pace, and you begin seeing all kinds of synchronicities. Like when we're interfering with life and trying to control it and be like, well, I should do that, I should do that, I should make money, I should be like this, I should impress those people. Those shoulds, or dress in some way, or have some kind of job, those shoulds interfere with this intelligent flow of life that wants every piece of it to be free to be what it is and what it's designed to be. So these 5 qualities describe what's already true and shine the light to the fact that we can step into them. For example, I have you heard of the website Masterclass?
Yeah.
It's full of these legendary people, right, who are best in the world at their thing, from Scorsese to, I don't know, Usher, Aguilera, and many writers and so on. So when it first came out, I was obsessed with it, and I watched maybe 10, 20 different masterclasses. Some of them skipped pieces and so on, because I wasn't necessarily interested in the skill they were teaching. I was interested in the character of the teacher.
Yeah.
Right? In how they think about life and who they are as a person. And I was, again, I maybe watched more than 20 by now. And what I've noticed is that the same thing is being echoed. So the best in the world, they follow their passion. And that's one of the main teachings they give also to the students. It's like, do you. I like that Scorsese says that, look, if you want to make movies, don't become a movie maker. But if you can't live without making movies, then be a movie maker.
Yeah.
Because that's the freedom, like you, and it's safe to do that. For example, recently I saw Jeff Koons, which is an artist.
Yeah.
I didn't know about him, but apparently he's very, very famous and successful. So it caught my attention that at some point he said, look, follow your interests, and you have to trust that that will take you in the right direction. And he's been doing that since he had this kind of shift when he was in his 30s. Now he's about 60, I think. So it's like you have to, as we're talking about here, you have to trust that your freedom will take you, the freedom to be you, to follow your joy, will take you in the right direction. But you see, that's the thing. You don't have to trust, because truth reveals that that's safe, actually. So
yeah,
it's not necessarily about trust, it's about pointing at truth, and truth shows you that, of course, that's how life works. Life wants you to be you, you know.
So basically, to bring it back to my diet, following my natural tendencies, right, is my best expression of whatever works best for this body, or in that sense, right?
Sure, at this point of your journey, that's what's true for you.
Yeah, just to make it practical. Right. What's the third one?
The third one, let's say, it's wholeness. So wholeness, like from the absolute perspective, you could say that life is already whole. It's wholeness itself. There's no lack in the divine. It's just wholeness playing as, you could say, lack, or as experience. So once we realize that, it's like this moment is whole with whatever it contains. Even if what it contains is a sense of lack. It's so whole that it's wholeness as lack. So anyway, once we know our nature as wholeness, we're not these beings running around to find wholeness somewhere in some goal and some result. We're acting from that wholeness. It's like, what would wholeness do? Well, it would play. You know, it's like
you could say that lack is a judgment of wholeness, right?
Yeah, sure. So wholeness is the same as security, you could say as well. So if you're secure, that's kind of the problem that I see, and the reason I started this whole secure being thing is because as humans, we tend to seek security outside, right? And we seek, and we eventually find out that it's not there, because no matter how much security, millions, billions, and so on, and relationships and results and validation you get, you're still insecure inside. So you can't find security outside. So then eventually we turn around and we begin looking inside, and we discover security in the awareness of truth and some of the things we're discussing here, the awareness of who you are and how harmoniously life works. And once we find security inside, or wholeness inside, and so on, then you live from security outside, and that's when actually life works harmoniously and sustainably outside, which ironically creates a lot of security outside too, because if you function in a harmonious way in a relationship, for example, it's going to be, a long-lasting relationship if it's relevant for it to be so. So if you approach business in an ethical, aligned way with your nature and so on, you're going to have a very successful, secure business. But you see, you don't seek security outside, you find it inside, and you function from that wholeness and security outside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a beautiful one. I think there's so much wholeness if we don't take whatever happens personal, right? If we think it's not about us but it's just life expressing itself, it is already whole.
Yeah, life is always whole. Like we said, it's whole with this. Yeah. And this moment is wholeness expressing as this moment.
Yeah.
As it is.
I think that resonates with oneness as well, right?
Yeah, oneness is kind of from the perspective of the divine, right? Oneness is that it's all one. It's just one thing happening. That seems to have different expressions of itself, but it doesn't mean it's separate. It's kind of like different waves or there's the typical examples of if you make something from gold, it's all gold. Like maybe it's a different shape, but it's still gold.
Mm.
Or if you make something from clay, an object from clay, it's clay. So just because things are different doesn't mean they are separate. They are divided. It's just one thing expressing as I see life as a theatrical experience, if you will. It's a big theater that is meant to evolve like what's the point of theater? It has a moral. So it's a moral development. It's kind of let's move toward the harmonious functioning so that life can express in a harmonious, creative, joyful way. So that the divine, if you will, which you could say it's potential, that potential can manifest in a harmonious way, in an ever expanding, joyful way.
Yeah, and then the funny thing is, I think if you have all these teachings about being moralistic, but the more, even though I feel that I agree with that it's a sort of moral play in the end, there's a sort of natural expansion that happens in this way, and if you force it, you can feel the unnaturalness of that, even if you force beautiful morals.
Exactly. I mean, that's not what I'm talking about. It's not about forcing it.
No, of course. But I'm just, because if we have a sort of end in mind, like, right, being morally perfect, which is not the end, but just saying, then it just feels like a normal person would think, well, I need to force these values in my life, right?
That's the first paradigm thinking.
Yeah.
Right, where you're trying to simulate what is not natural yet.
Or second paradigm, right?
Like even the first and second. I mean,
okay, yeah.
There's different levels of the same thing because you're acting from insecurity. Yeah. You're trying to understand life, and you're in the first paradigm. You're trying to force rules and follow rules and dogma. In the second one, it's not externally imposed rules, it's internally imposed, but still imposed. So the same with the vegan thing, you can't be vegan if you don't feel like being vegan. Yeah. And even if you wanted to, you wouldn't be able to sustain it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and how would you explain to people sort of why it's one, why the divine is one, or why we are all one, or how would you explain that?
Yeah, there's many ways. So if you think of a dream, the person in the dream seems to be separate from the environment and from the other people in the dream, but all of it is made of the dream, of the imagination of the dreamer.
Yeah.
So in that metaphor, there's no separation.
Yeah.
It's all made of the imagination of the divine, if you will. So that's one way. But the other, of course, this...
I like this way.
This ideally should be experiential. And a lot of the mystics and sages, they have these oneness experiences. I haven't had it. But I guess it's an experience. It's being shown experientially that, okay, this is all one thing, and then they keep talking about it, and this becomes pointers for us who haven't had it yet, or you don't actually know. Maybe you've had it and you don't remember, or you had it in a different lifetime. Like the question is, how do you live it? Like, is this lived as one thing?
It's also because we don't have a two-ness experience. It's very hard to distinguish, because almost we have no oneness experience, because we only have a oneness experience, like a fish in the water looking for water.
Yeah, that metaphor with the fish is nice, because You could say what the fish says, what water? Like water, what is water? But then you could also say, fish, what fish?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
It's like, there's no fish,
Yeah,
just water.
yeah. And then to climb a tree, that would be totally strange. But yeah,
Yeah. But yeah, what were we talking about?
oneness. So I
Oneness.
think
Yeah.
we're going to the. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
A different way to explain oneness is like I appreciate Thich Nhat Hanh's explanation.
Mm.
I was listening to one of his retreats at some point, and he beautifully kind of explained that can you separate yourself from a cloud? You can't, because the water in the cloud eventually falls onto earth, and then it flows through your faucet, and then you drink it, and you become that water. So what's the difference? Like there's no separation there. Like, you can't separate the human body from the clay of the earth and the food. Can you separate yourself from a tree? The tree makes an apple. You eat it, you become the tree. Like what's the difference? So it's all in the dream. It's all made of the dream, just in different forms. And I mean, there's so many ways to quantum mechanics, quantum physics. When it digs deep enough, it sees that it's just pure potential taking different shapes.
I think he says something like also, which I love, that he's talking about the flower having no flower qualities or something like that. So that everything that the flower is non-flower, basically.
Yeah.
That everything sort of delivers a piece which creates the flower, which makes it totally non-flowery, which is very cool.
Yeah, but the way this manifests, the oneness manifests in our embodiment, you could say it's as a sense of connection with everything, with the other person. It's kind of like helping you, I help myself in a different body, with a different mind.
Sometimes what I love as well to say, like if you're mean to somebody, you feel bad, which is a direct clue that basically that you're the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the models I used when I was briefly teaching a few people or coaching a few people on this is that if you imagine a wave, it's like the top of the wave is the physical, the body, and so on, very separate, seems very separate. When you go deeper, like the second layer of the wave, you could say it's the mind, the non-physical thing, you could say the soul. But then you go a third layer deeper and you just find the ocean. So at that level, in that sense, we're all one. Right? Yeah. So it's one thing expressing as these waves, which are not really separate.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think the fifth quality was abundance, right?
So we talked about harmony, freedom, wholeness, oneness, and abundance. Yeah, abundance is really good. It's really cool because for me, it's pointing at the all-giving nature of life. So you could say that life contains everything, or the divine contains everything, and it does everything. Like we have in Christianity, that God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient. So in that sense, everything is always given moment to moment. The next experience unfolds for us. Like what needs to happen is given. The next idea, the next kind of step, the next project, person to meet, partner, soulmate, and so on. There's no need to seek. Like when you understand this idea of abundance, the all-giving nature of life, seeking drops, because like Rumi says, what you seek is seeking you.
Yeah.
So this has to do with like these qualities that we just discussed, they begin to translate into form as virtues or values. Like, as humans, we tend to aspire to these like virtues, and we think, well, a virtuous person who has a moral character is very evolved. That's why they tend to call kings and queens as Your Majesty, Your Highness, and so on, all these like majestic words, because ideally those people should be very evolved beings, because they are in charge of other beings, right? So they should be very they should be very moral and so on. I mean, the only thing with morality is not that it has to be imposed. It's something that nothing else makes sense, because everything else hurts, right? Like when...
Yeah, and you also have wrong morality, right? So when we say this, we're talking about pure morality, like do no harm and things like that 10 commandments type of things. But we're not talking about, morality as in a sort of morality as in chastity and things like that, because there's so much wrong morals as well, I think, in the world.
Yeah, no, we're talking about what's a harmonious, optimal way of functioning in the world.
Yeah. Do you have anything other things you like to share about abundance before I ask you another question?
For example, abundance has to do with money as well. So it has to do with understanding that money as well is something that is given. So it's not that it's given externally, it's given through you as well. You don't have to seek it intentionally. You just have to, as I see it, follow your nature, follow your joy, and you end up doing what needs to be done that ends up creating money.
Yeah.
So in that awareness, that neediness, that needy relationship toward money begins to fade away.
Yeah, also, I think one of the things which opens these divine qualities with security and safety and things like that is the idea of not needing anything or not wanting anything, but just being in a way, and not forcibly, but realizing that everything is already okay, or everything is already won, and through that, or already safe, and through that we know that we don't need anything, or we don't need to even desire anything. It's not that we don't desire, but it's more that we don't force a sort of personal insistence on that desire.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a different way of functioning. It's not functioning in search of security. It's functioning from a place of security. And life doesn't stop just because you are feeling safe and secure. Life actually, that's when it begins to function in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because before that, it was dysfunctional in subtle ways and less subtle ways, like hurting people and so on.
Yeah.
Hurting ourselves.
So I have another question for you. What is we talked a little bit about this, but I think it's this important thing to talk about is what is your definition of surrender? Because you had a twofold one, I think.
Yeah, surrender is the awareness that life does everything. It's not something that you do. It's something you could say maybe you remember, but not even remember. You become aware of this as a truth, and then surrender is already the case. Just like acceptance, you don't accept life, you realize that life is already accepted as this.
You could say acceptance is not resisting.
Sure.
Right? It's more of a negative one. Like acceptance is already there if we don't resist what is.
Yeah. I really like Jeff Foster. He has a whole book about this. It's called The Deepest Acceptance. So he describes, and I agree that he describes acceptance as like if this is showing up like as your emotions, your thoughts right now, no matter how negative and so on, or life with its problems and so on, like no matter how it shows up, the fact that it shows up this way, it means it has already been accepted by life.
Yeah.
Into existence.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by acceptance, and the same with surrender. It's not something you do, it's something that's already the case. You just become aware of it.
Yeah, because I think for a long time I've sort of seen surrender as not controlling anything which wanted to happen or not happen. Sort of surrendering my actions, you could say, to life, or sort of letting life move through me. But the funny thing is, I've only recently realized that this has always been happening, and the only difference was my mental suffering.
Yeah.
Right, that there's just this 10% of my experience that was based on a sort of mentally trying to push myself in some sort of direction which I thought was right, but couldn't know what was right, but was just based on sort of popular opinions or my upbringing or something like that.
Yeah.
But that actually the right thing or the best thing was always happening, was always this life expressing itself through me. But there was just a mental layer, you could say a meta layer of judgment, which was not yet, you could say, filtered out, or like you say in the mental immune system, not yet processed, because it was leading me to the process of deeper understanding or truth. Through pain, actually, through a lot of mental suffering.
That's often how it happens, right? But I mean, look, I'm pointing at one aspect of surrender. There's many different ways to define surrender and point at it. I like Rumi's pointing at it. He says that, look, you see the dust dancing in the air, but you miss the wind moving it.
Mm. Yeah. That's nice.
So that's very precise, very beautiful. So if you think, yeah, anyway. But then the other part of surrender we could talk about is the surrendering of your fear, of your control, of your worries. You could say that's also surrender. Again, it's not something you do, it's something that you become aware, that your mind becomes aware that it's safe enough to do that. So it happens by itself because you're shown that you are safe. So then it's safe enough to drop the thinking, to drop the worrying, to drop the trying, the figuring out, the controlling, the grasping. So that's also an aspect of surrender. It's like you're surrendering the seeking and the fear.
So I had this strange, I think this is different for a lot of people, but I had this sort of strange strange thing happen to me, like after my spiritual awakening, or I had an awakening experience. Afterwards, I could not really, before I was very forced and disciplined with myself, especially mentally, but I could also, in a way, seemingly force myself to do certain things like exercise or work things or things like that. But afterward, this sort of ability to be so enforced or resistant to whatever wanted to happen was gone. It feels like, and I felt like I automatically had no option but to surrender, but that I didn't not feel safe yet to surrender, even though it was already happening.
Yeah.
So I had to really warm up to that to that idea as well.
Yeah, so this brings me to the third aspect of surrender that we're kind of talking about here. It's the surrender to your joy. Or you could say, so it's the action part of surrender. We talked about the attitude side of surrender, the kind of inner awareness side. When it comes to the action side, it's a type of non-doing. So you surrender agenda. You surrender a need to take any action other than what is energized into action by life, from life. So you're basically moved through your own joy. And the way I see it is that what needs to get done is energized into action by life from its own intelligence. Which actually brings me to the three paradigms. And it's kind of like in the first paradigm, you have doing, and then you have the second paradigm, you have thinking, and the third paradigm, you have being, right? So, at the doing level, we're doing a lot of stuff. At the thinking level, so we're using a lot of energy trying to be safe and survive, having lots of jobs and so on, and forcing ourselves to do things we don't want to do. That's very exhausting, actually. In the second paradigm, we try to be smart about it. So thinking comes in and tries to strategize life.
Yeah.
Right. So we're doing less, but smarter. And then in the third paradigm, when being becomes the priority, only the relevant action gets done. So it's like when you move through the three paradigms, action becomes less and less and more relevant.
Yeah.
So when you, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, for me, what I also noticed is that action was not per se less, but it's sort of like, because I was forcing so much, then I sort of had the individual experience that when that dropped, that there was a lot more relaxation, but it also seems to, with time, sort of a more and more relevant action is allowed, you could say.
Yeah.
So I feel that at the beginning, I just did what was relevant, which was maybe 1/10 of my day or something like that, which was actually sort of focused, productive or something like that. And I feel that maybe I need less relaxation after a longer time of this non-doership or surrender or whatever. And there's more capacity naturally to do loads of things which are relevant or seem good by life,
Yeah, that's for you in your case. So that applies to each individual.
Yeah, sure.
For me, for example, it's been 2 years of pretty much no responsibilities, doing nothing other than going out, having coffees, listening to books and materials, reflecting about life. So apparently, I haven't been doing much. Although you could argue I've been doing a lot that is relevant for me.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
So compared to the second paradigm, I could have been trying to do a lot of stuff to be productive that weren't actually aligned with my nature. So for my nature, a lot of doing indeed happened that is relevant for me. In your case, it's your kind of doing.
But maybe it also has to do with sort of a time schedule, because if I think for the first years, not much happened. And then also you could say, maybe it also has to do something, but I don't know about this. It has to do, of course, with your own nature as well, but also I think with how much you forced yourself before, probably.
Exactly, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the needless efforts that were previously used to achieve goals and be productive fall away. So all that doing falls away. What remains is only relevant doing.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
There's a great movie, actually, not a movie, but a TV show called Messiah.
Okay.
It's on Netflix, I think.
Okay.
Which is the idea that Jesus came to Earth in a modern day society, and how people are reacting to him. And I just love the way they built that character. I actually haven't watched the whole thing. I watched the first episode, and then I skipped to scenes in the movie where only he was acting, Jesus, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved how little action he was taking, but the action that he was taking was perfectly relevant. So that's an example of like how much less you can do, but what you do is done by life, and it's very synchronistic, and it's very relevant, and so on.
It's beautiful. Thank you for that. Great. Yeah. Yeah, it's such a nice journey. It's such a nice journey. It's so beautiful to dip in truth, or to sort of be cleansed by life. It's such an important experience, and it's very undescribable for people who have not yet noticed it, or are on this path while they're already on this path, but consciously, It's a very strange experience, and it's very beautiful as well. And it sounds like, if you're trying to explain this to people, I don't know if you like how your experience with that is, but when I explain it to people, it sort of sometimes feels like so natural that it's almost like a threat. It's like so. Like how can this work? It sounds like vacation, and it's like, well, the problem is you think vacation is a problem, right? So sort of permanent vacation is a joy. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
But it is very easy to misunderstand that for people that would say to me like, but how are you doing your taxes? And I'm thinking like, yeah, how can I explain that taxes are just happening? It's just, and that there's seemingly no resistance to at some point doing my taxes.
Exactly.
And
that's the thing.
Yeah, it's very strange.
That's the thing, that it's not that what needs to get done doesn't get done.
No.
It gets done. It just gets done in the most natural way at the right timing. And it doesn't feel like effort. That's the key to this, because usually the mind, which is fear-based, given that it doesn't understand reality properly, when it drives the bus, it forces life. It's like the wave trying to move itself. It's like, the wave has a to-do list, and it has to do this. So it's apparently moving itself, and it's very stressful, and it's almost desynchronizing itself from the most effortless, smooth flow of life. However, when you kind of relax, and you relax into being, then life moves you, the ocean moves you, as it always has. There's just no more friction. So, like, what I noticed in my experience, for the last 2 years especially, is that life is constantly synchronistic. It's funny that when I first learned about synchronicity about 2 years ago, I was so excited. I was in the US at the time. So I said, okay, God, show me, if life is not random, and it's actually synchronistic, show me 10 synchronicities today. And I ended up counting 10 synchronicities that day, maybe 11 even.
Wow.
It was striking for me. I was like, okay, but there's a key to this, which I'm going to share in a moment. And then I couldn't believe it. So the next day I said, okay, let's do this again. It's like, if this is actually true, I want to count 30 synchronicities today.
Wow. You're really pushing it here.
And it's funny that I ended up counting about 20 something, 27 or something like that.
Wow.
And synchronicities, for example, are things that it's the outer world reflecting what's happening inside of you. So you're thinking about something, and then you open the book, and the next phrase you read, it's exactly what you were thinking just a few minutes ago. It's like, what the heck? And then you're going. I would go to the cinema, I would watch a movie, and then the character would say almost the same idea in the movie. It's like, what the heck? You know, so it's the external mirroring the internal very much. It's this kind of coincidences. Or I would drive my wife to, like, there's small synchronicities and they're like bigger ones, very striking ones. But an example of a small one, I would drive my wife to work in a white Honda, a CRV. And on the way back, I would see the exact same car, white Honda CRV, same kind of year model, in front of me. I mean, what are the chances of that kind of thing happening? You know, that's like small things, and then there's bigger ones. So basically, my process then was like I wouldn't try to force it, but I would count everything that strikes me as a potential synchronicity. So as I counted them, I was very surprised that this is actually not a random unfolding. It's a very much intelligent unfolding. But the key to this that I found is that in that period, I was completely agendaless. And since then as well. So I was just following my joy. And that's the key to, like, when you align with life, you can see the sequence of events so much that you recognize the synchronicity of it, like all these coincidences. However, when we're, just to finish, say, when we're functioning from fear, we're creating friction. Life is still synchronistic, it's just not visible. So.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, it's. I know that I, at some point, was reading like the autobiography of a yogi by Yogananda, and I was in Thailand and was with my girlfriend, and we had, I think it's like 8 years ago, and by then I was starting to really become really into meditation and spirituality and things like that. And I was, there are a lot of monks in Thailand, but it's one of the only ways to get a good education. So a lot of young boys and girls, or especially boys, they become monks, but not because they want to be a Buddhist or want to be a monk, but because they want a good education. Basically, their parents want that. And so you see a lot of monks on the street with smoking or with iPhones or things like that. And it's very young monks, of course, but also older ones where you see in the look on their face that they're not really tranquil or have these meditative qualities or things like that. And I noticed that, like, I was reading that book, and then we were like in a week we were going to leave Thailand, and we were there for a couple of weeks, and I said in my mind, I said, I would like, before we leave, I would like to meet a really like spiritual monk. And I immediately had a thought, go to Chinatown tomorrow at 12. And I said to my girlfriend, I said, tomorrow I would like to go to maybe Chinatown, maybe around noon, you know, like playing it casual, of course. And when we were there, I just allowed my intuition to take me somewhere. And at some point I was looking and I saw, like, in a side street, my girlfriend was a little bit ahead, and I looked in and I saw a beautiful temple. And I walked in, and I saw basically nobody, just a dog there. And this was, I think, 45 minutes into our Chinatown walk. And then I saw, like, a monk came by with a lot of groceries. And I said, hi. And he said, hi, like, would you like to come in? And I said, oh, yeah. And then sort of we went to sort of his room in the monastery, and he sat down and put his groceries down. And we had this whole conversation. And every time he spoke, he took like a minute pause to reflect on what we said and then give an answer. And then at some point I also asked him, like, do you meditate, or how much do you meditate? And he said, yes, of course. And he said, how much do you meditate? He said, well, not so much anymore because I need to give lectures and things like that. I said, but how much is that? He said, about 3 hours a day. You know, so we had this beautiful conversation for an hour, and he was sort of, this was for me like the perfect synchronicity thing, yeah, which was even before I knew what synchronicities was, basically. Yeah. But this opportunity in life, they open up so beautifully, and very interesting.
Yeah, what I've come to see by now is that synchronicity is the nature of life. Like I said, when we're acting from fear, we're just getting off the most synchronistic path, and it's apparently non-synchronistic. We don't notice many coincidences because we create friction in this flow. We're not fully aligned, like this, in the smoothest kind of flow. But when we do, when we're like agendaless, we flow with our joy moment to moment, it's crazy. I mean, just yesterday in the morning, I was thinking about some stuff. And then in the afternoon, I watched a movie. I mean, that movie was like a replica of what I was thinking. It's just crazy. Not just one synchronicity, but like countless on many different levels. Because I was thinking about relationships, and with a certain kind of person that I would want to be in a certain kind of place in the world. And that movie was exactly that, you know, and almost like playing out what I was thinking. And this happens constantly with movies, especially because movies are almost like an extension of life, because our lives are quite simple. So you can't see a lot of external synchronicities, but with movies, it's like you get to live vicariously through that.
Yeah, well, so what I want to ask you, and I think this is last question for this session, is because seemingly, like, if you look at things from a sort of non-dual perspective, it seems like there's no free will, and basically there's not per se predetermination, but there is a sort of life is already happening, right? It's already happening through you. It's already the thing, things like that. But then if you hear a little bit the metaphysical perspective, they're always talking about the creation of your own reality. And we're also talking about that a little bit with the synchronicities we've noticed, because the synchronicities, I cannot help but see it that related to sort of the allowance of being in your natural state.
Yeah.
So it seems like, on one hand, it seems like you can affect your reality, and on the other hand, it seems like it's already in a certain way, or already happening in a certain way, whether you're conscious of that or in fear in a mental state or not. What's your take on that?
It's not you affecting your reality, it's life affecting itself as you.
Yeah.
So it's life delivering new. This is how Roger Castillo describes it, which I like, is that life delivers new code. So it's life affecting itself. So, like, for example, someone watching this conversation maybe has an insight, and that affects his approach to life. And apparently he's going to affect his reality, which is going to maybe become more harmonious, more optimal, more synchronistic as well as a result. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but I think that's of course it's life affecting itself, but it's not like a predetermined way, but it's still important to live from love, you could say, right? A natural love, a sort of unconditional love, a sort of freedom, the qualities we talked about, and the safety, the security, the understanding of oneness and surrender and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, eventually we come to recognize that love is the only rational way. Like that's the only, it's the only way that doesn't hurt to live. Love, joy, and so on. It's not that I can fully live from love at the moment, because we still have layers of fear. I do, of fear and ignorance that come up constantly. I call it material, which comes up. But, love, truth, joy, and all these qualities we described today, these are the harmonious way to live, the only way that doesn't hurt. Because when you live in any other way, it hurts.
Thank you so much for that. That sounds very beautiful. I'll leave the links to your channel below if people want to work with you or want to discuss with you, follow you. And thanks again for this beautiful conversation, Liviu.
Thank you, Kees, for initiating this. This is actually an example of a synchronistic happening.
Definitely. With the mentorship and now this, very beautiful.
I mean, everything and the all giving nature of life, the abundant nature of life. It's I saw you, it was an impulse, a joy to watch your video and then to message you. It was your joy, apparently, to message me. It was our joy, right? To connect, and we synchronized in the same way of thinking. And then like all of this is very synchronistic. You see, like life is always giving itself what is relevant. So thank you.
Awesome. Let's speak soon. Bye-bye.